Kayla James looks at her phone screen. There's one email. From the dean's office. A payment reminder. Numbers dance before her eyes. A sum she can't afford. She's tried everything. Extra shifts, small part-time jobs, skimping on everything. It's not enough. Just a little. But that little is an insurmountable barrier. Expulsion in 3 weeks if she doesn't pay? The thought makes her sick. All her hard work, her studies, her dreams of graduating, all in vain. She stands behind the bar in a half-empty room after midnight. Her shift is almost over. There's one last table left in the VIP area. Lee Hansel and his 2 partners. They've spent the entire evening here, discussing business over bottles of expensive imported liquor. Quiet, reserved, but their bill is growing by leaps and bounds. The idea comes suddenly, ugly and obsessive. At first, she pushes it away. It's madness. It's a risk. But the number in the letter doesn't disappear. She looks at the men. They are rich, very rich. For them, $500 is small change, something they'll forget in a minute. For her, it's a pass to next semester, the difference between a future and failure. Her heart starts pounding. She looks around. The bartender is busy washing glasses. The security guard at the entrance is looking at his phone. No one is paying attention to her. She picks up the tablet with the ordering system. Her fingers, cold and uncertain, glide across the screen. She opens their account. In front of her is a list. 2 bottles of premium liquor A, 1 bottle of liquor B, some appetizers. She adds 1 more item to the order. A 2nd bottle of liquor B, the same one they already drank. She knows its price by heart. $500. The amount at the bottom of the screen increases. Her breath catches. It's too simple, too scary. She can almost physically feel someone watching her through the camera or over her shoulder. But everything is quiet. She presses the print invoice button. The small printer behind the counter hums and spits out a long receipt in a black leather case. The paper receipt feels scalding hot to her. It's now or never. She approaches their table. Her legs are weak. Her smile is plastered to her face. Everything for you, gentlemen. Have a nice evening. Her voice sounds alien and too loud. She places the case next to Hansel's elbow. He, still quietly conversing in Korean, nods without looking at her. She steps back. The first part is over. She watches from around the corner of the bar. One of the partners picks up a case, skims a long check, and says something with a smile. Hansel takes the check from his hand, and then his demeanor changes. He doesn't just glance over the lines, he slows down. His gaze, usually absent-minded, becomes sharp, focused. He looks at the list of items. His gaze rises from the paper to the bottles on the table, then returns to the check. He does this once, twice. He doesn't frown. His expression doesn't change, but his posture takes on a tense, collected look. He says something quietly to his partner, who shrugs, smiling as if to say, "No big deal." Hansel looks straight across the room. He's looking for her. His dark eyes find her at the bar. He doesn't wave. He doesn't call. He just looks. His gaze is sticky and heavy. There's no question in it. There's a statement. "I see." Kayla freezes. Everything inside her drops. He noticed. He counted the bottles. He saw the extra line. He slowly, deliberately takes a thin black wallet from the inside pocket of his jacket. He takes out a credit card and places it in the case on top of the receipt. His movements are hypnotically slow and precise. He looks up at her again and gives a slight, barely perceptible nod, an invitation to come closer. Kayla approaches, feeling the floor shift beneath her feet. She takes the case. Her fingers brush against his card. "Thank you, sir," she whispers. "Be careful with numbers, Miss James," he says in his quiet, even voice. They have a way of telling the truth, even when we don't want them to. He doesn't smile. He just stares. Then he turns back to the guests, as if he's just made a casual remark about the weather. She runs to the terminal with her card. She swipes the payment. The check clears. The extra $500 is now part of his transaction. She returns to hand over the card and check. Her hand is shaking. He takes them, his fingers carefully avoiding her skin. "Have a nice evening," he says. and there's a strange, icy finality in his tone. He doesn't call the manager, he doesn't demand an explanation. He simply pays. And with this calm, indifferent payment, he tells her more than a shout. He says, "I've got you, and I've decided I'm not going to do anything about it for now." This is worse than any immediate punishment. It's uncertainty. It's a noose around her neck, the end of which he holds. Kayla feels his gaze on her back for the rest of her shift. Even after he's long gone, she realizes she's done more than just something stupid. She's touched something large, cold, and dormant. And that something has now opened its eyes. The car stopped at the nondescript service entrance of a high-rise building in the business district. Men in suits led Kayla through empty, brightly lit corridors to the elevator. They went to the very top. When the elevator doors opened, another door appeared before her. A solid one, made of dark wood. One of the men knocked, twice, clearly, and opened it without waiting for a response. Elle and Hansel's office was spacious, quiet, and empty. Too empty. A huge room with floor-to-ceiling windows, beyond which the city glowed at night. But inside, there were no paintings, no figurines, no bookshelves, just a large ebony desk at which he sat, two equally formal chairs in front of it, and a built-in cabinet. The floor was covered with a dark carpet that absorbed sound. It was cool and smelled clean, like an operating room. There was nothing superfluous, nothing personal. This place didn't speak of wealth. It demonstrated absolute control. Control over space, over sound, over the situation. Kayla felt her throat tighten. This room was oppressive in its minimalism. Hansel didn't get up. He sat leaning back in his chair, his hands resting on the armrests. He looked at her, letting her take in her surroundings, taking in where she was. Then he gestured to the chair opposite. "Sit, Miss James." As she sank onto the hard seat, he silently opened the top drawer of his desk and pulled out not a computer, but a simple cardboard folder. He placed it on the desk, turned it toward her, and opened it. Inside were neat sheets of paper, printouts, and a few photographs. "You've shown initiative," he began quietly. "But initiative without discipline is noise. Let's sort out your noise." He pulled out the first sheet. It was a printout of a receipt from her shift 3 days ago with notes. Item 1. Gross invoice falsification. Amount $500. Method: adding a non-existent item. Objective: quick fix for a financial problem. Risk: extremely high. Detected: instantly. He put the sheet aside. The second sheet is a printed spreadsheet. Item 2. Systematic tip pocketing. Over the past 4 months, you have pocketed up to 20% of tips from new waitresses you deemed incompetent 7 times. The amount is small, but the principle is clear. You take what you consider fair compensation without permission. The third page is a copy of the bank statement. Item 3. Forgery of a document to obtain a loan. You altered the figures on your income statement to improve your chances. You were not approved for the loan, but the attempt was recorded. He pulled out a photo. It showed Kayla working behind the counter of a pop-up street cafe a year ago. Item 4. Manipulation of accounts at your previous employer. You inflated the change for some customers to get bigger tips. Unscrupulous methods. He closed the folder and folded his hands on it. His gaze was completely calm. You're not a thief in the traditional sense. You're a tactician who uses financial fraud as a tool for short-term survival. That makes you interesting and dangerous to yourself, first and foremost. Kayla sat stunned. He knew everything, every little detail. She felt the room grow even colder. Now here's the situation, he continued, without changing his tone. You have a choice, just 2 options, which should be clear to anyone with a logical mind. He paused briefly, giving her time to collect herself. Option 1. You start working for me. Your job is to analyze numbers, accounting reports, cash flows, the schemes of my partners and competitors. You will look for other people's machinations, weaknesses, and deceptions. I will pay you 10 times your current salary. I will fully cover your university fees until you graduate. You will receive protection. Option 2. His voice didn't waver. In 1 hour, this folder will be sent electronically to your dean, the club's management, the bank, and the security departments of every major financial institution in the city. You will be expelled for fraud. You will be fired without a recommendation. The bank will open a case for attempted fraudulent loan acquisition. You can forget about a career in finance, and I will make sure you are never hired again by any decent establishment in the city, even as a cleaner. He leaned back in his chair. You came into my sight by deceiving me. Now you will either become my tool or an example to others. Time to reflect. 3 minutes. Kayla looked at him, then at the folder, then at the city lights outside the window. Rage boiled within her. Rage at herself, at him, at the hopelessness. Fear gripped her body like icy tendrils. She thought about her mother, about her studies, about her debts, about the dead end he had described so clearly. Her dreams of an honest career crumbled to dust in this sterile office. There was no choice, only the illusion of choice. Okay, she breathed, her voice hoarse and strained. Okay. I agree. On your terms. He nodded slightly, as if he'd been expecting those exact words. A wise decision. He opened his desk drawer again, pulled out a single sheet of paper and a pen. It was a brief contract, simple and impersonal. There was no company name, just a list of duties, confidentiality obligations, and the compensation amount. He handed her the pen. Her fingers trembled as she took it. The signature at the bottom of the page felt like her own blood, not ink. She signed her first and last name, feeling like she was finally selling something important. Hansel took the signed sheet without looking at it and placed it in a drawer. Then he opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a stack of papers in a blue folder. He placed it in front of Kayla. Your first task. These are the quarterly financial statements for my restaurant chain for the past year. Accounting has reviewed them, and everything is in order. Your job is to review them again. Not like an accountant would. Like you would if you were trying to hide or steal something. Find any discrepancies, even the smallest ones. You have 48 hours. He glanced at his watch. You'll be taken home. I expect your analysis the day after tomorrow, same time. He pressed a button on his desk, and the office door quietly opened. One of the men was waiting for her. Kayla stood, her legs almost numb. She picked up the heavy blue folder. The papers inside felt hot. She didn't look at him again and walked out, feeling the door close behind her, cutting her off from the world where she still had the elusive illusion of freedom. Now she had only reports, a deadline, and the cold gaze of her boss, who was waiting for results. Kayla had spent 2 days barely sleeping. She sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by printouts. A folder of reports lay before her. These weren't just numbers. It was a maze. The official accounting department had done everything correctly. Income, expenses, taxes, salaries. Everything added up to the last cent. But that's not what Kayla was looking for. She was looking for something less obvious. Not one major theft, but a multitude of small inconsistencies. As Hansel put it, as if you were trying to hide something. She started with food expenses. Each of the 12 restaurants had a line item labeled seasonal fruits and vegetables. The amounts varied, but were within normal limits. She compiled all 12 figures into a spreadsheet and began comparing them month by month. And she noticed a pattern. In each restaurant, the amount for this line item fluctuated from week to week. Not much, by $50, $70, $100. But it always jumped at the end of the month. And always by just enough to increase the restaurant's overall expenses and, correspondingly, decrease net profit slightly. Too neat to be a fluke. Too small for an accountant to dig into. It was like a tiny, regular bleed. She calculated the total for all the restaurants for the year. It came to several $1,000s. Not a business disaster, but a system. She wrote a report, brief and to the point. She didn't speculate about who might have done it. The manager, the chef, the supplier. She simply attached tables with numbers, highlighted the anomalies, and concluded, systematic overstatement of expenses for seasonal products by 3 to 5% in the last week of each month. Total annual losses, excess. Exactly 48 hours later, she was brought back to the same office. Hansel was sitting at the same desk. She placed the printed report in front of him. Silently. He picked up the sheets of paper and read slowly. His face was expressionless. He reached the final total and looked at the tables. The reading took about 5 minutes. In the silence of the office, only the rustling of paper could be heard. He put the report aside. He looked at Kayla. There was no gratitude in his eyes, no joy. There was a cold, satisfied interest, like that of a scientist whose experiment had yielded the expected result. "Good," he said simply. "You found the needle. My people were looking at the haystack. You counted every straw and found one that was a different shade." He wasn't praising her intelligence. He was stating a fact. His theory about her usefulness had been confirmed. "The manager of the third restaurant is doing this, in collusion with the supplier. We'll get to the bottom of it. Your work is done." He opened the drawer and pulled out an envelope. Not a thick paper one, but a plain white one. He placed it on the edge of the table next to her. "Your reward for completing the task. Your regular salary will be transferred to your card. It will be processed for you." Kayla took the envelope. It was light. She left the office without another word. In the car, on the way home, she opened it. Inside was a plastic bank card in her name, and an ATM receipt. The amount was printed on it. Her first paycheck. The one, 10 times her usual amount. She looked at the numbers. It was a sum she couldn't have earned in 6 months as a waitress. Her hands, holding the check, trembled. But it wasn't a tremor of joy. She suddenly understood. She understood with terrifying clarity. This money solved all her problems. Rent, tuition, her mother's debts. Everything, now and for many months to come. But this was precisely the trap. If she took that money and spent it, and she had no choice, she had to spend it. Otherwise, she'd be kicked out of the apartment and expelled. There would be no turning back. She couldn't just up and leave Hansel, because then all those problems would return, but with double the force. She'd have no job, no reputation, no money. He didn't buy her with threats at that moment. He bought her future. He gave her a taste of security that depended entirely on him. She came home and placed the card on the table. She looked at it. It wasn't a piece of plastic. It was a gold collar, beautiful, comfortable, solving all her everyday problems, and incredibly durable. She'd taken it willingly. She'd signed her name to it. And now it had materialized in the form of this sum in her account. She could throw away the map. But would she throw away her studies? Her apartment? The chance to help her mother? No. She was in a cage. The walls of that cage weren't made of iron, but of money, comfort, and solved problems. And she herself, with her own hands, had slammed the door when she signed that contract. Now all she had to do was get used to the sight of the bars. And work. The next day, a car came for Kayla again. But they didn't take her to a skyscraper, but to an ordinary office building in the business district. It was unremarkable. On the 15th floor, a man in a suit led her down a corridor to an inconspicuous door with a code. Beyond it was not an office, but a large open space, reminiscent of the headquarters of an IT startup. Powerful computers with multiple monitors lined the walls. Columns of numbers, graphs, and charts ran across the screens. It was quiet here. Only the quiet hum of the cooling systems could be heard. Several people were working, all in casual clothing, focused on their screens. No one looked at her. There was nothing here that suggested criminality. This was a high-tech data analysis center, a place where crime looked like dry statistics and violence like an unfavorable market trend. She was shown to her workstation, a desk with 3 monitors and a powerful computer. "Everything you need is in the system. We've already sent you your login and password," the attendant said and left. Kayla sat down. Her new world was sterile, digital, and impersonal. Hansel's first assignment appeared in her internal email. Subject: Audit, Nord Stream Transport Company. The email was bare bones, just files with financial reports, driver data, logistics routes, and fuel costs for the past 6 months. The task? Find anomalies indicating internal theft or information leaks to competitors. The company was legitimate, operating in the freight market, but Hansel suspected someone inside was leaking data on valuable or vulnerable cargo so it could be intercepted. He needed to find the mole. Kayla immersed herself in the numbers. She compared fuel consumption by route, analyzed flight delays, and compared stated and actual travel times. After 2 days of painstaking work, the picture began to emerge. The anomalies pointed to one of the dispatchers, a man named Jiming. He had been with the company for 5 years. He had access to all routes and cargo. During his shifts, the statistics for random breakdowns and delays on certain sections of the track jumped by 15%. He wasn't stealing fuel or cargo directly. He was apparently selling information about when and where the valuable van would travel. Kayla, as instructed, requested more data. She received a file with a brief profile of the employees. She opened the file on Jiming and froze. His photo was on the screen, his usual tired face, and below it, information. Wife, 2 children. Youngest daughter, 3 years old. Diagnosis: a serious illness requiring expensive treatment. The sums were unaffordable for the dispatcher. Kayla leaned back in her chair. These weren't just numbers. There was a person, a desperate father. He didn't steal out of greed. He sold information to save his child. She closed her eyes. Fury and pity warred within her. She hated him for betraying her, but she understood him to the core. Hadn't she herself been willing to deceive herself to save her future? The only difference was the scale and the fact that she had fallen into Hansol's clutches, while Jiming was possibly selling the data to his competitors. She paced her small apartment for 3 hours, unable to sit down at the computer. If she remained silent, Hansol would find out for himself. His monitoring system was too extensive. And then her own usefulness would be in question. And her future, for which she had already received money, would collapse. If she spoke, she would doom this man and his family. There was no choice. The same hopeless choice as Jimin. She sat down at the table and wrote a short, dry report, without emotion. Just facts, figures, and a conclusion. The likely source of the leak was dispatcher Jimin K. The reasons were possibly related to personal financial difficulties. She sent the letter. The answer came quickly. She was summoned to Hansol's office. He was sitting at his desk, her report lying before him. "You've confirmed my suspicions," he said. His voice was even. "Your job is done." Kayla couldn't take it anymore. What will happen to him?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Hansol looked at her. There was neither malice nor satisfaction in his gaze, only a cold statement of fact. "He committed a crime against the organization. He will be punished." He paused, watching her reaction. "If I show weakness in such a matter, 20 people will betray me tomorrow. Order is based on clear rules and an understanding of consequences. His personal circumstances are his personal problem. They do not give him the right to steal from me and jeopardize my people and my business." He pressed a button on his phone. "Take action against dispatcher Zimin from Nord Stream, fully, according to the protocol for treason." He hung up. Kayla understood what completely meant. This wasn't just a dismissal. According to protocol was something worse. She didn't know the details, but a cold horror gripped her. Hansol looked at her. "Empathy is a luxury, Miss James. It's unavailable in our world. You can feel sorry for him, but you've provided information. That makes you part of the process. Remember that. Your clarity of mind is your tool. Don't cloud it with feelings. Otherwise, you'll become useless, and useless things get removed." He made it clear to her that she hadn't simply found a traitor. She had become complicit in his punishment. She left the office, feeling sick. She thought about his daughter, about his wife. She thought about the envelope of money in her bag. The price of her comfort and her future was too concrete, and too terrible. She had entered a world where order was maintained not by law, but by cold cruelty, and she had just carried the torch for that order. Kayla couldn't get Jimin out of her mind. She came to the office the next day with dark circles under her eyes. Hansol summoned her. He saw her condition immediately. "You weren't sleeping," he stated without asking. "Because of what you did to that man," Kayla blurted out, unable to contain herself. Her voice wavered. Hansol sighed, as if explaining an obvious truth to a child. "I did nothing. He made his choice. I merely imposed consequences. Your mistake is that you consider this cruelty. It's not cruelty, it's hygiene. Sentimentality is a luxury for those who live in a safe world. In our world, it is a weakness that leads to death. You pitied him. Fine. But what if my driver had died because of his leak? Who would pity his wife and children? The balance of consequences here is always simple. He chose his family, putting mine at risk. His choice was taken into account. He spoke calmly, like a mathematician. Do you want to survive here? Stop counting the losses of others. Count the risks, your risks. Anything else is an unacceptable waste of energy. She listened, and rage boiled within her. Rage at his coldness, at the truth of his words, at herself. That simple? To turn off feelings? Don't turn it off. Put it in strict quarantine. Or they'll kill you. He looked at her intently. Lesson learned. Learn it, and you'll stay alive. Failure to do so will make you a burden. She jumped up from her chair, her hands clenched into fists. She was a step away from the table, filled with blind rage. You monster! He stood up too, slowly. His movements were quiet, but they suddenly held a dangerous energy. He didn't raise his voice. A monster? No. I'm a realist. And you're a hysterical woman, crying over what you've done. He took a step forward, closing the distance. They stood close, almost touching. His dark eyes burned with a cold fire. She saw every feature of his face, felt the tension radiating from him. Anger mingled with something else, with a sharp, forbidden awareness of his power. Her breath caught. She wanted to scream, but there was a lump in her throat. He saw this confusion. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, a mockery. You see? Even your anger can't escape. Because you understand, I'm right. She recoiled as if struck. The tension snapped, leaving behind a void and a strange, aching embarrassment. She left without another word, feeling her face burn. Hansel's men approached her at the office, a tall, rough-faced man everyone called Jew. He placed his heavy hand on her shoulder, making her flinch. Beauty, I have a favor to ask of you. Help me check something in my reports. My accountant is sick. His tone was pompously patronizing, his gaze sliding over her. Kayla tried to politely decline, citing her workload. His face immediately darkened. I'm asking you politely. I've never heard of anyone refusing when Jew asks. His fingers dug into her shoulder. At that moment, Hansel emerged from his office. He had seen everything. He approached silently. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the room heard it. Jew, take your hand away. Jew turned around sharply, but didn't let go of her. Boss, Hansel's voice rang with steel. Her time and her skills are mine, not yours. If you're having trouble with your reports, hire your own accountant. I don't want to see you anywhere near her again without my direct orders. Understood? A deathly silence fell over the office. Jew slowly removed his hand, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. He nodded without looking at anyone and quickly left. Hansel looked at Kayla. Get back to work. And then he went into his office. The protection was swift, absolute, and public. He made it clear to everyone. She was under his personal protection. That didn't make her safer. It made her situation even more special and dangerous. The following week, Kayla received a new batch of data. It contained more than just company reports. It contained figures related to very specific transactions, the movement of large sums of cash through a network of currency exchangers, and bills of lading for dual-use equipment. This was a whole new level, closer to the heart of his real business. She sat and stared at the screen. It was a test, an obvious one. He'd given her access to something real to see. Would she be scared? Would she run to the police? Or would she break under the weight of this knowledge? It was a trust trap. If she showed the slightest doubt or tried to copy something for herself, just in case, he would know. She was sure. He waited for her reaction. She took a deep breath and opened the files. She began working as always, methodically, carefully, looking for patterns. She wasn't trying to understand the operations. She was simply looking for digital anomalies. She played by his rules, demonstrating that she had accepted his lesson. Feelings, quarantine, only work, only calculation. It was the only way to survive. and the only way, perhaps, to ever find her own trump card in this game. Working late one evening, Kayla was distracted by a message from her mother. A short, "Everything is fine, don't worry." She sighed, putting away her phone. At that moment, Hansel appeared in the office doorway. He rarely came out into the common area. "Break?" he asked, approaching her desk. "Yes, just family," she answered briefly, not wanting to go into details. He leaned against the next table, crossing his arms. "Your mother lives in another area, works as an accountant for a small firm. She has health issues, joint problems, and a credit card debt that's bothering her." He said this evenly, as if reading a report. There was no question. He was simply stating facts she needed to know. Kayla's blood ran cold. She stared at him, speechless. He knew. He knew every single detail. "Family is a weakness, but it must also be factored into the calculations," he said, and walked away, leaving her alone with an icy lump in her chest. It wasn't interest. It was a reminder. Her life, with all its details, was in his file. And he could touch any point at any moment. 2 days later, her mother called her, worried and confused. "Kayla, what's going on?" "The bank called me. They say my credit card debt has been cleared in full, anonymously. I didn't pay anything. Do you know anything about this?" Kayla sat with the phone to her ear, and the world around her swam. She knew. She knew right away. "Don't worry, Mom," she managed to say. It's a bonus from my new job. I wanted to surprise you." She lied smoothly, her heart pounding. After the bell rang, she couldn't resist entering Hansel's office without knocking. He looked up at her. "You paid my mother's debt," she said, not hiding the tremor in her voice. "Yes," he replied simply. "That solves the problem. Now she won't be nervous, and you won't be distracted by her worries. It increases your efficiency." He spoke as if he were optimizing a business process. "I didn't ask you to do this," she blurted out. "That's exactly why I did it," he snapped. "It's not a gift, Kayla. It's an investment in your peace of mind. Now you have one less thing to worry about, and one more thing to be grateful for." He looked back at the papers in front of him, making it clear the conversation was over. He hadn't bought her silence with money. He had bought her silence with relief. And that was 1,000 times worse. One day, he called her into his office, not for a debriefing, but for a brainstorming session. On the desk lay complex financial schemes linked to one of his main competitors, a Chinese syndicate attempting to encroach on his territory. "Something's wrong here," Hansel said, pointing to the chain of transfers. "It's all legal, but it's too smooth, too clean." Kayla sat down, peering at the numbers. There was silence for about 5 minutes. "Here," she pointed to one of the lines. "International transfer fee. It's 0.5% below market rate, always. It's either an error no one notices, or a special channel." "And if it's a channel, why show it in legal reports?" Hansel asked, his eyes narrowing. "To launder it, making it look like it's part of a regular operation," Kayla quickly replied. "If everyone's looking at the big sum, they don't notice a small anomaly in the commission. But through that gap, unaccounted, services could be slipping through. Bribes, maybe." He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "So their weak link isn't in the main flow, but in the servicing bank, the one who set that preferential rate." They exchanged a few more phrases, short as rapier blows. He set the direction. She found digital confirmation. There was no arguing. There was a shared calculation. At some point, their gazes met over the papers, and a strange understanding hung in the air. They spoke the same language, the language of numbers and hidden patterns. It was dangerous and exciting. A week later, an incident occurred. One of the senior lieutenants burst into the office. Hansel, a man named Joe. His face was contorted with rage. He was shouting something about betrayal, about how his own nephew, whom he had brought into the case, had leaked information to the police. Hansel walked out of the office. His face was calm, but Kayla, standing nearby, saw a muscle in his cheekbone twitch nervously. "You vouched for him, Joe, with your head," Hansel said quietly. "I know, boss. I'll handle it. I'll get him myself." Hansel's voice suddenly shot up, turning into an icy, strangled growl. He didn't shout. It sounded like snapping steel wire. Have you figured it out yet? You brought a rat into my house. Your sentimentality is now causing everyone problems. He took a step toward Andre. His eyes, always so cold, raged with genuine, uncontrollable fury. Not calculated malice, but human, hot rage at the betrayal of someone he trusted. It lasted only a few seconds. He exhaled sharply, turned away, and ran a hand over his face. When he turned back to Andre, his gaze was once again filled with only ice. Take it away! Yourself! And I never want to see him or you in my business again. Go away! Joe, pale as a sheet, nodded and almost ran for the exit. Hansel stood watching him go, his fists clenched. Kayla saw how hard he was breathing. For a moment, he was no longer a flawless machine. He was a man betrayed and furious. Then he met her gaze. And in that instant, all traces of emotion vanished, smoothed out, as if they had never been there. He turned silently and went back to his room, closing the door tightly. But the crack had been there. Kayla realized that beneath the cold shell lay more than mere calculation. There was something there that could be touched. And this knowledge was terrifying and more valuable than any financial scheme she could find. Kayla had been searching for this for months. Late at night, when the office was empty, she delved into the depths of the internal network. Not directly, but through legitimate companies she already knew. She was looking not for numbers, but for connection patterns, hidden accounts for emergency transactions, and she found it. One account in a small Asian bank. It regularly, but at varying intervals, received funds that were then dispersed into charitable foundations. But one transfer 6 months ago was larger, and it stalled. The bank requested additional documents. The transfer was frozen, and then, apparently, the problem was resolved and the money was gone. But a trace remained, and this trace indicated that the account was Hansel's personal emergency fund. Not for business, for himself. In case everything collapsed, and the unfreezing procedure was complicated, it required keys from 2 people. One was him, the second, judging by indirect evidence, was his old accountant, who died a year ago of a heart attack. Hansel, it seems, never had time to fully re-register access. It was a vulnerability, tiny but real. If you knew the account number, the history, and froze the transfer, you could block his personal exit from the game. She copied the data not to her work computer, but to an encrypted cloud storage that only she could access. It was her insurance policy. Silent, digital, and deadly if discovered. Sharon, with whom she had been in freshman year, approached her. He looked nervous. Kayla, hi, how are you? Listen, I need to talk to you about work. They went to a cafe. Sharon spoke quickly, nervously. He had started at a new consulting firm that dealt with Asian investments. He had learned that Kayla was working for Hansel. His boss, Mr. Zhang, was very interested in establishing contacts. He was offering Kayla simple information on delivery schedules, nothing criminal, for good money. Kayla's heart went cold. Mystery? Zhang was known as the right-hand man of the leader of a hostile Chinese syndicate. It was a direct attempt at recruitment. She abruptly refused, told Sharon never to approach her like that again, and left, feeling the ground shifting from under her. She immediately realized they had reached her through her weakest link, her past, normal life. The next day, Sharon didn't get in touch. That evening, a message from an unknown number arrived on her phone. A photo. Sharon was sitting on a chair in a dark room, her face bruised, her eyes full of terror. A voicemail followed, a calm, slightly accented male voice. Miss James, your friend will live if we get what we asked for. Shipping schedules through the port for next week. You have 24 hours. Don't go to your boss. We're watching. The message ended. Kayla sat in her apartment in complete silence. Panic, cold and sticky, rose in her throat. They had kidnapped Sharon because of her. Because of her connection to Hansel. If she went to him, Sharon would be killed. If she tried to get the information herself, she would be caught. And Sharon would be killed too. If she did nothing, he would be killed too. All roads led to the death of an innocent man. And she was at the center of it. She spent a sleepless night analyzing her options. She had her trump card, the account data, but it wouldn't help Sharon now. Hansel was the only force capable of doing anything, but if she went to him, she'd reveal her knowledge of the kidnapping, and he might decide Sharon was a threat that needed to be eliminated, or that Kayla herself had been compromised. The risk was enormous. Exactly 12 hours later, in the morning, she made her decision. She didn't go to the office. She drove straight to the skyscraper, to his office, bypassing all the usual procedures. His secretary tried to stop her, but she simply flung the door open. Hansel was sitting at the table. He looked up, saw her face, and his eyes narrowed. What happened? Kayla closed the door. She stood straight, her hands at her sides, but her voice was firm, without its usual tremor. Jang's people tried to recruit me, through my old friend Sharon. I refused. He was kidnapped yesterday. They sent me a photo and gave me 24 hours to hand over the shipping schedules through the port. They said they were watching and warned me not to come to you. She exhaled. I came to you because I have no choice, and because this is no longer an attempt to gain information. This is a declaration of war against you. Through me. They know who I am for your operation. Silence fell over the office. Hansel didn't move. He studied her. He looked for signs of lies, panic, game playing, but he saw only tired determination. Why did you come? He asked finally. You could have tried to steal the data and trade it, or simply run away. Because they'll kill him anyway, as soon as they get what they want. Because if I steal from you, you'll find me and kill me. But it doesn't matter to him, because this is your conflict, and you're the only one who can resolve it. I'm bringing you information about the attack, not as someone who owes you one, as an ally. You protect your people. Now they've attacked a man through me. That means they've attacked me and your structure too. She spoke clearly, using his own logic, his own language. She didn't beg. She was making a cold calculation, offering him a situation where his actions would be dictated by interests, not feelings. Hansel slowly leaned back in his chair. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not irritation. A quick, almost elusive respect. She hadn't come to save her friend at the cost of betrayal. She had come to inform the commander that the enemy had opened a new front, and she had shifted the responsibility for the decision to him. You did the right thing by coming, he said quietly. Now it's my problem. Your task is to behave as usual. No data will be leaked. Your friend will take care of him. He pressed a button. Assemble a team. We're working on an urgent, unscheduled mission. An enemy group has kidnapped a civilian connected to our employee. We need to find and extract him, quietly and quickly. All the data is in Ms. James's possession. He released the button and looked at her. Go home. Wait. Don't contact anyone. If they text again, call me. He paused. You did the rational thing. Kayla nodded and left. She'd made her bet. Now everything depended on him. And for the first time, she felt not just fear of him, but a strange, uneasy trust in his efficiency. She'd staked Sharon's life on his cold, ruthless calculation. And, paradoxically, it was her only hope. Hansel didn't waste time on reproaches. He immediately gathered his men and sprang into action. But his goal wasn't simply to save Sharon. He was using the situation as bait. While his team monitored the kidnapper's communications, pinpointing the location where the boy was being held, Hansel gave another, more discreet team different orders. He knew Jang would expect a response, either panic or an attempt to pass on information. He let them wait. And then he struck elsewhere. While one group prepared to storm the abandoned warehouse on the outskirts where Sharon was being held, the second raided Jang's key logistics center at the port. While the enemy's attention was focused on Kayla's possible data leak and their hostage, Hansel's men quickly and quietly incapacitated the guards and destroyed a large shipment of special goods scheduled to leave by sea that very night. This was a painful financial blow, not just a gesture of force. Then, almost simultaneously, the warehouse was stormed. The operation was swift and precise. Jang's men, caught off guard, were neutralized. Sharon was found bound, in shock, but alive. He was immediately taken to a safe location for medical examination. None of Hansel's group were seriously injured. Kayla only learned of this a day later. Hansel called her. He was sitting at a desk with a single piece of paper on it, a brief report on the operation. Your friend is safe. He suffered minor injuries, but the doctors say he's fine. He's currently under our care. His parents were informed that he was in a minor accident and will be undergoing rehabilitation outside the city for a while. He looked at Kayla. She stood there, waiting for him to continue, waiting for retribution for the problem her past had brought into his world. Zhang lost over $500,000 and a key channel tonight. He received a clear message. Attacking through my people is a costly mistake. You were the trigger, not the cause. You assessed the situation correctly and brought me the information. This was a test, and you passed it. He pushed the report aside. So now we're even. Your original debt, that fake invoice, and my collection of deceptions, they no longer matter. I'm closing this account. The debt is defaulted. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out the very same cardboard folder, the very same incriminating evidence that had started it all. He placed it in front of him. Then he picked up a heavy metal ashtray and a lighter. Without a word, he opened the folder, pulled out all the pages, folded them loosely, and set them on fire. Kayla watched, mesmerized. The paper burst into flame, blackened, and turned to ash in the metal bowl. The evidence of her petty sins was fading. Smoke rose to the ceiling, extinguishing the last embers. Symbolical, he said, looking at the ashes. The past is burned away. Now you have a choice, Kayla. A real choice. He looked at her, and his gaze lacked the usual cold assessment. There was a concentrated seriousness. You can leave. Today, you'll get all the money you earned. Your friend will be safe. He's getting treatment. Your mother will be debt-free. You can finish university and get a regular job. I won't stalk you. You're free from our agreement. He paused, letting her take it all in. Or you can stay. But if you stay, everything changes. This is no longer a duty or a coercion. This is a partnership. You will become not my tool, but my strategist, my financial advisor. You will know all my operations, legal and not. You will build schemes, not just poke holes in them. You will get a cut and the power that comes with your role, but you will also inherit all the risks. You will become not a slave to be discarded, but one of the key players, the most dangerous and valuable card in my deck. If I am ever taken, you will be next. If you betray me, I will kill you not as an unruly employee, but as an equal competitor. This is a different level of play, high stakes, high price. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. Think about it. This isn't an offer I'll make twice. And this is the last time I'll make any offers. From now on, there will only be orders or joint decisions. Depending on your choice, you have until tomorrow morning. Kayla looked at him, then at the ashes in the ashtray. Freedom. It was right here, in this office. She could just leave. Close this terrible chapter. But what was freedom? A return to struggling for rent, to job hunting with the stigma of no experience, to perpetual lack, to the vulnerability that had drawn Zhang's attention to her. Freedom was fragile and impoverished. And here was a challenge. Power. The chance to use her wits not for survival, but to build something. Even if it was in the shadows, the risk was mortal. But she was already in this world. She was already a target. Wasn't it safer to be inside the fortress than outside its walls, unprotected? I don't need it until tomorrow, she said quietly but clearly. She looked up at him. I'm staying, but on 2 conditions. First, I don't engage in violence. My weapon is numbers. Second, if I ever want to leave for real, we'll find a way that won't be a betrayal. You'll let me go. Otherwise, no deal. Hansel looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slightly. Understood. Welcome to the game, partner. Kayla returned home after a conversation in the office. The silence in her apartment was deafening. She didn't turn on the light, went into the living room, and sat on the floor by the large window, looking out at the city at night. For the first time in months, she wasn't surrounded by immediate threats, reports, or the feeling of a noose around her neck. There was only silence and choice. She began to recall everything that had happened, the initial fear in that alley when they came for her, the cold horror in the sterile office as he laid out the folder in front of her, the humiliation of her forced agreement. Then the work, numbers, charts, reports. She remembered how she hated his icy calculations, his inhuman efficiency, how she feared his quiet voice, which decided people's fates. But then there were other memories, brainstorming sessions in his office, their minds working in sync, and she felt a sharp, almost scientific excitement. The moment when he publicly put Hua in her place, erecting an invisible barrier around her. His fury at Andre's betrayal, that very crack in his icy mask that revealed that somewhere deep inside there was something that could be touched. Even his gesture of paying off his mother's debt, however manipulative, solved a real problem she couldn't even imagine. And finally, today, he didn't just save Sharon. He turned her problem into an opportunity to strike at the enemy. He burned the file. He offered freedom, not as an escape, but as a conscious choice. What does respect for such a man mean? It's not admiration. It's recognition of strength, effectiveness, and a kind of honesty. He never lied to her about who he was. He never promised anything good. His rules were cruel, but clear. In a world that always seemed chaotic and unfair to her, his was terrifyingly predictable. Certain actions had certain consequences, always. And the challenge? The challenge was the most tempting. It offered her more than just a job. It offered a game, a high game, where the stakes were real power, influence, money. Where her mind could be used not for counting tips or tricks to avoid deductions, but for building financial empires. It was an addiction, dangerous, deadly, but incredibly powerful. She felt her mind languishing for years within the confines of poverty and restrictions, yearning for this challenge. He saw in her not just a thief, but potential. And this, oddly enough, was the greatest compliment she had ever received. And there was this strange connection, not romantic, not friendly. A connection between two sharp minds forced to interact under high pressure. The bond between executioner and condemned, which had transformed into the bond between commander and soldier, and now could become the bond of partners. She feared him, but he respected her, and perhaps, somewhere deep down, she had begun to respect him too. The way one respects a hurricane or a deep abyss. She thought about freedom, ordinary life, an office, deadlines, a mortgage, small joys, and constant financial worries. Vulnerability. What happened to Sharon showed. She was already written into another book. Hansel's enemies now knew her by sight. Freedom outside his protection was an illusion. Zhong or someone else could come for her again, to get to him. Being an independent target was more frightening than being a protected part of his system. At dawn, as the first rays of sunlight painted the sky a gray-pink hue, Kayla made a decision. It came not as a flash of insight, but as a cold, final calculation, the most important calculation of her life. She showered and put on her best business suit, simple, dark, and formal, not to impress, but for herself, to feel appropriate for the occasion. She didn't call to warn anyone. She simply arrived at the skyscraper with the first employees. She walked through the familiar hall and boarded the elevator. Her face in the mirrored walls was calm, tired, but focused. No fear, no servility. She went up to his floor. The secretary, seeing her, wanted to say something, but Kayla was already heading for his office door. She knocked twice, clearly, and entered without waiting for an answer. Hansel was already there, working at his computer. He looked up, saw her, and a hint of surprise flashed in his gaze. He probably expected her to ruminate until the last minute. She walked up to his desk and stopped in front of him, not sitting. She stood straight, her shoulders squared, her chin slightly raised. Not the pose of a prisoner begging for mercy. The pose of an equal, come to negotiate. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice even and unwavering. He pushed himself away from the keyboard and folded his hands on the table. "I'm listening." Kayla took a deep breath. "You offered a partnership, but partnerships aren't built on one-sided terms. You gave me a choice. Now let me lay out the terms under which I'll stay in it." He didn't answer. He simply inclined his head slightly, allowing her to continue. Interest lit up his eyes. "You can't buy me with money," she began. "You've already done that, and I acknowledge their power. They solve problems. But the money don't you buy loyalty. I'm not intimidated by the past. You burned it. And that was a nice gesture. But that's not the basis for long-term cooperation. She paused, looking him straight in the eye. I'm interested in the future. Concrete, measurable. You talked about power, about stake, about the role of strategist. I want to see this path. Not vague promises. I want to understand the mechanics. How will my stake grow? What decisions will I make independently? And which will we discuss? Where are the boundaries of my responsibility and my power? I don't want to be just a dangerous card in your deck. I want to know the rules of the game we're playing together. And lastly, and most importantly, she continued, her voice growing even firmer, you said that if I stayed, I'd stay for real, that I wouldn't be your debtor, but your partner. Then I should be treated accordingly. I'm no longer Miss James, who carries out assignments. I'm not asking for equality in everything. Your empire is yours, but I demand respect for my intellect and my contribution. Not as a tool that works well, as a person building this empire alongside you. Show me what that future holds for me, specifically as a partner, not as the smartest and most useful servant. Then, yes, then I'll stay. And then you'll get more than just an analyst. You'll get an ally. She fell silent. Silence fell over the office. Hansel didn't move. He studied her. His gaze slid over her face, her straight back, her arms lying calmly at her sides. He searched for traces of uncertainty, bluff, fear. He found none. This wasn't the frightened girl from the bar standing before him. This was a woman who had been through his trials and emerged from them with a cold-steeled determination. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the corners of his mouth twitched. It wasn't his usual cold smirk or mockery. It was a genuine, subtle, yet sincere smile. It didn't make his face warm, but it made it come alive. His eyes, always so dark and unreadable, blazed with genuine, unadulterated interest and the very respect she spoke of. Okay, he said quietly. The single syllable echoed in the quiet office like the click of a lock closing a new door. Sit down! He gestured to the chair opposite. It wasn't the same gesture he'd once used to order a frightened debtor to sit down. It was a gesture inviting an equal to the negotiating table. Kayla sat up. She didn't look down. Let's start with the mechanism, Hansel said, his voice taking on a businesslike, emotionless tone, but now acknowledging her right to ask these questions. Your share will start at 5% of the net profit of the legal sector you oversee. Each successful year of proven growth increases it by 1%, up to a maximum of 15%. We will determine the success criteria together. You will have full access to all financial flows to see the big picture. Your decisions within your sector are final. Actions affecting the overall strategy or going beyond this require my approval. We will discuss this weekly. Your area of responsibility will be all financial intelligence, finding vulnerabilities, constructing schemes, analyzing competitor risks. You will be my chief financial advisor. No one, including Hua or anyone else, will have the right to question your professional decisions in this area. They will be implemented. He paused. As for respect, you've already earned it through your work and through today's conversation. From now on, you're Kayla, to me and to everyone who matters. And I'm Hansel to you, not the boss in your mind. Partner or adversary, if you ever change your mind. These are the rules of the game. High stakes, high reward, and complete transparency within our roles. Deal? He extended his hand across the table, not to hand over a document or an envelope. To seal a deal, to seal a new agreement. Kayla looked at his hand. Long fingers, neat nails. The hand that had signed sentences, burned files, and now offered an alliance. She raised her hand and shook it. His handshake was firm, dry, strong, not condescendingly dismissive, like the first time, and not demonstratively overbearing. It was equal. It's a deal, Hansel, she said. He nodded, released her hand, and leaned back in his chair. Your first project as a partner is already waiting. Zhang's plans after our visit yesterday require revision. He'll be weak, and we need to determine his next weak point for financial pressure, not a forceful strike. I want your analysis by the end of the week. He turned back to the monitor, signaling the business part was over. But before she could get up, He looked at her again, and that small, almost invisible smile touched his lips again. "And Kayla, welcome to the game." "For real." She walked out of the office. The door closed behind her with a soft click. She stood in the empty corridor, and a strange feeling filled her. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't fear. It was a feeling of absolute, utter clarity. She had made her choice. She had entered the game with her eyes open, set her own rules, and been accepted as an equal player. Her future was tied to a dangerous and unpredictable man, but now she viewed that future not from a cage, but from the command bridge. Let the ship sail through dark waters. Now she had the map and a say in which direction the helm would turn. She walked down the hallway toward the elevator, her steps precise and quick. Work lay ahead. Analysis, schemes, risk, power. Her new life had just begun, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like this was her life, her decision, her game. And in the office behind the closed door, Ellen Hansel stared at the screen, but couldn't see the numbers. New combinations and calculations were forming in his head, where the variable was no longer just a useful tool, but a lively, sharp, unpredictable mind that he himself had unleashed at the very core of his empire. This was the biggest risk he had ever taken, and the most exciting. He let that slight smile linger on his face for a second longer, before erasing all emotion again and immersing himself in his work. The game was truly just beginning, and a new, very dangerous player had appeared. He eagerly awaited her first move. The first project in her new role was like a challenging exam. Kayla gained access to data she could only previously guess at, complete cash flow charts, the shadow accounting of competitors, including Zhang himself, lists of affiliated individuals and companies. She dove into the analysis with cold focus, but now with a different feeling. These weren't someone else's numbers she had to verify. This was a puzzle, the solution to which would increase her own stake and power. She wasn't simply looking for a vulnerability. She was looking for a point of maximum pressure. 3 days later, she came to Hansel with a completed presentation. She didn't print anything. Instead, she connected her tablet to the large screen in his office. The forceful strike was effective but costly. It made Zhang more cautious, but it didn't break him. "His weakness isn't logistics, but reputation," she began, switching slides with graphs. "Here, through a chain of shell companies in Cyprus, he receives investments from several perfectly legitimate European funds. They think they're investing in a promising logistics startup. If we provide these funds, and financial regulators at the same time, with a verified package of documents proving these companies' ties to his syndicate and money laundering, the funds will panic and withdraw their money. This will undermine his legitimate cash flow and will attract unnecessary attention from governments. The blow will be financial and reputational, without a single shot being fired." Hansel stared at the screen, his fingers cupped around his mouth. "Risk?" he asked in one word. "The risk is that the investigation could uncover clues that lead to some of our legal operations connected to the same regions. We need to carefully craft our reporting to focus exclusively on its structures. This requires time and sophisticated numerical analysis, creating a flawless yet incriminating narrative. Time? 2 months to prepare the documents and choose the perfect moment for the leak. I've already identified the entry points." He nodded slowly. "Go ahead. This is your project. Coordinate the necessary resources through me. I want to see interim reports once a week." That was it. No corrections, no double-checking. He accepted her strategy as a given. That was more trust than any words. In the following weeks, Kayla worked herself to the bone, but for the first time, the strain was voluntary and intoxicating. She managed a small team of IT specialists and lawyers assigned by Hansel. She learned to give orders, argue her case, and make decisions that affected large sums of money and the lives of people. She was no longer a passive observer. One late evening, when she was overworked at the office, the door opened. Hansel walked in. He took off his jacket, hung it over the back of a chair, and sat down at the computer next to him. "Show me where you're slowing down," he said simply. They worked side by side for 3 hours in near silence, punctuated by brief questions and equally brief answers. He helped her navigate a legal pitfall she hadn't considered, sharing a contact in Asia who could verify some information. This wasn't guidance, it was collaboration. When the main task was accomplished, he leaned back in his chair. You're a quick learner, but remember to look 3 steps ahead. Zhang won't just wait for a blow. He might counterattack through your greatest asset. Through my mind? Kayla asked, rubbing her temples tiredly. Through your past. Now that you're in the public eye, everyone will start digging. Your mother, your friend Sharon, even those minor sins I burned away can be restored if someone is interested enough. We need to build new layers of protection. Legends. You need to have an impeccable, legitimate biography, parallel to our reality. We'll start building it tomorrow. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. This is partnership, Kayla. I cover your weaknesses. You amplify my strengths. And together, we build something no Zhang can destroy. After he left, Kayla stared at the flickering screen for a long moment. He was right. The game wasn't over. It was getting more complex. But now, she had more than just a master. She had an ally who saw her value and was willing to invest in her growth and protection. The price, of course, was her complete belonging to this world. She stood and walked to the window. The city below lived its own life, naive and distant. Her life was here, in this tower of glass and numbers, in a dangerous symbiosis with the man who had once been nothing more than an icy stare from the darkness of a bar. She didn't know what the future held, power, ruin, or something else entirely. But she knew one thing. This was her choice, her calculation. And now she had to play it so she would never regret it. She turned off the light and left the office, her footsteps echoing in the empty hallway, leading her into a new, dark, but endlessly fascinating reality.